The moment Patricia Reynolds saw the message on her husband's phone, she felt her world collapse. A deafening silence filled her ears as her eyes remained fixed on the bright screen. "Too bad you weren't here 2 years earlier before I got married." Those words, sent by Nathan to Vanessa, seemed to burn themselves into her memory. Her trembling fingers nearly dropped the device as the reality of what she was reading sank in. 2 years of what she thought was a perfect marriage suddenly felt like an elaborate lie. Patricia had never been the type to snoop through her husband's phone. She respected boundaries and believed in trust. But when Nathan fell asleep on the couch with his phone unlocked after weeks of increasingly distant behavior, something compelled her to look. A gut feeling she'd been trying to ignore finally demanded attention. Just 3 months earlier, they had been discussing having children. Patricia, at 34 and in her penultimate year of studying education, had been overjoyed when Nathan seemed eager to start a family. They had it all planned out. She would finish her degree, they would convert the spare bedroom into a nursery, and their family would be complete. That conversation now felt like it had happened in another lifetime. The changes in Nathan had been subtle at first. Small things that were easy to dismiss, working later than usual, being less affectionate, keeping his phone closer than before. Then came the hour when they used to disconnect from technology and focus solely on each other, a sacred ritual in their marriage that gradually disappeared without explanation. Nathan, once so attentive and present, became a ghost in their home, physically there but emotionally absent. Patricia stared at their living room, taking in the framed wedding photos on the wall, the comfortable furniture they had chosen together, and the small touches that made this house their home. She remembered how excited they had been to buy this place, Nathan carrying her over the threshold, like in old movies, both of them laughing until they couldn't breathe. Now the same house felt suffocating, filled with memories that seemed to mock her current reality. One evening last month, she had finally gathered the courage to confront him. It was after dinner, the dishes done and put away, when Patricia approached Nathan as he was about to retreat to his home office. Another new habit that had emerged. "Nathan, we need to talk," she had said, her voice steadier than she felt inside. He had looked up with mild irritation, as if she was interrupting something important. "What is it, Patricia?" "I have some work to finish." "You've been distant." "You don't talk to me anymore, not like before." She remembered how her heart had pounded as she spoke the words she'd been rehearsing for days. "I'm just tired from work," he had replied dismissively. "The Harrison project is taking a lot out of me." Patricia had taken a deep breath before continuing. "No, honey, I know it's not that. You're not like this." She had reached for his hand then, relieved when he didn't pull away. "Is there someone else? Have you done something you regret? You can tell me the truth, even if it hurts. We can go to couples therapy, work through whatever this is. I don't want to lose what we had, that special connection." Nathan's face had hardened then, his eyes narrowing. "Are you accusing me of cheating on you?" His voice had risen, filling their kitchen with unexpected hostility. "I told you, I'm just tired. This is what happens in marriages, Patricia. The spark fades. It's normal." Those words had stabbed deeper than any confirmation of an affair could have. The casual dismissal of what they shared, reducing their love to something temporary and disposable, had left her speechless and devastated. "Okay," she had finally managed to say, fighting back tears. "If you need to talk, I'm here. Just please, don't forget about us." He had simply turned and walked away, leaving her alone in their kitchen, tears silently streaming down her face. For the next month, Patricia had tried everything to rekindle their connection. She prepared his favorite meals, suggested weekend getaways, and even bought new lingerie that now sat unworn in her drawer. Each attempt was met with indifference or outright rejection. Nathan became increasingly attached to his phone, guarding it like a precious artifact. The password, once shared openly between them, had been changed without explanation. Patricia's friends had started to notice the change in her, the fading smile, the distracted responses, the reluctance to talk about her marriage. Her classmate from education courses, Amber, had even taken her aside after class one day and asked if everything was all right at home. Patricia had simply nodded and changed the subject, unwilling to speak the fears aloud. as if doing so would make them irrefutable reality. And now, here she was, holding the proof of what her heart had suspected, but her mind had refused to accept. As she scrolled through the messages, she discovered that Vanessa was an old high school friend who had recently moved back to town. The conversation started innocuously enough, catching up on old times, discussing mutual friends, but quickly evolved into something more intimate. Flirtatious comments, inside jokes, plans to meet for coffee that extended into dinner and drinks. Patricia put the phone down exactly as she had found it and walked to their bedroom in a daze. She sat on the edge of their bed, the bed they had chosen together when they first got married, and stared at the wall. No tears came. Instead, a strange calm washed over her, bringing with it a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She knew exactly what she needed to do. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Patricia packed a suitcase with just her clothes and personal belongings. She didn't take any of the expensive gifts Nathan had given her over the years. Not the jewelry, not the designer bags, nothing that would connect her to this life they had built together. She wrote a simple note that said, "It's over," placed it on the kitchen counter along with her wedding ring, and left Nathan's phone unlocked with the incriminating conversation open. She called a cab and didn't look back as it pulled away from the house she had once thought would be filled with the laughter of their children. As the familiar streets gave way to parts of town she rarely visited, Patricia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She had no concrete plan, but she had her education, her determination, and most importantly, her self-respect. For 3 days, she stayed at a modest hotel, ignoring the increasingly frantic calls and messages from Nathan. On the 4th day, she finally sent a terse response. "The divorce papers will be ready next week. I'll let you know when to sign them. And don't worry, I don't want anything from you." His reply came almost immediately. "Stop this, honey. Come back home. How are you going to live? You don't work. You're still in school. How will you pay your bills? Where will you get money from?" That conversation was nothing, just catching up with an old friend. The manipulation in his message only strengthened her resolve. She didn't bother to respond, instead meeting with a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. Despite the attorney explaining that she was entitled to half of their marital assets, Patricia was adamant she wanted nothing from Nathan except her freedom. A week later, they met at the notary's office. Nathan looked disheveled, as if he hadn't been sleeping well. When he took the pen to sign, he had the audacity to say, "Sweetheart, stop this. There's still time." Patricia looked him directly in the eyes and said simply, "Sign." With a smirk, he signed the papers and said, "I wonder how you'll survive with nothing. But fine. When you regret this, let me know, and we can get married again. If you want, you can still send me your school bills, and I'll pay for you." She remained silent, her expression serious and determined. What Nathan didn't know was that Patricia had recently received a $200,000 inheritance from her grandmother Beatrice. But this wasn't why she was leaving. She had already decided to divorce him and walk away from their joint possessions before learning about the inheritance. Her principles mattered more than material comfort. Instead of working as a waitress, as she had initially planned, Patricia secured a paid internship in her field. She rented a simple apartment and focused on finishing her education degree. Her natural talent with children and innovative teaching methods made her stand out so much that before graduation, she already had a signed contract with the school. While Patricia rebuilt her life brick by brick, she heard through mutual acquaintances that Nathan had moved on quickly. Just 3 months after their divorce was finalized, Vanessa Hartley had moved into what was once Patricia's home. The gossip didn't hurt as much as she had expected it would. Instead, it confirmed that she had made the right decision. 1 year later, Patricia graduated with honors. She had flourished professionally, becoming a valued member of the teaching staff at her school. However, as she progressed into a coordination position under Director Elizabeth Harrington, she felt constrained by the rigid educational system. The structure was too inflexible for the innovative teaching methods she wanted to implement. This was when Patricia decided it was time to put her grandmother's inheritance to good use. With careful planning and research, she invested almost everything into starting a homeschooling consultancy business. developing programs to help children learn beyond traditional classroom settings. Her business quickly gained a reputation for excellence, showing parents that homeschooling wasn't just sitting at the kitchen table with apples teaching math, but rather practical activities that developed valuable skills. She became a well-known reference in the city and surrounding areas, even winning awards for her educational innovations. Meanwhile, Nathan's life took a different turn. Patricia occasionally heard that he was losing his assets to women who came and went from his life, but she felt no satisfaction in his misfortune, only indifference. 5 years after their divorce, during an education conference in the city, Patricia unexpectedly ran into Nathan. The encounter was tense, but he asked if they could talk. With reluctance, she agreed to hear him out over coffee. What he had to say would stir memories she thought were long buried, but would also confirm that leaving him had been the best decision she had ever made. "I'm sorry," were the first words Nathan spoke as they sat across from each other in the quiet corner of the cafe. The 5 years since their divorce had not been kind to him. His once confident posture was now slouched, fine lines etched around his eyes, and his expensive watch and designer clothes had been replaced with more modest attire. Patricia studied him with detached curiosity. "For what exactly?" she asked, her voice steady and neutral. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, the warmth grounding her in the present moment. Nathan took a deep breath, his eyes briefly meeting hers before looking down at his untouched coffee. "I'm sorry for not being the man you deserved back then." A familiar ache stirred in Patricia's chest, but it was distant now, like remembering an old injury that had long since healed. She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I should have said this to you 5 years ago," he continued, his voice lower. "That day when you said, 'If you need to talk, I'm here. Just please, don't forget about us.' I remember every word, Patricia. I should have listened." Patricia did remember that day clearly. The desperation she had felt, the plea in her voice, and the cold indifference with which he had walked away. But those memories no longer had the power to hurt her. "I threw away the best thing in my life," Nathan said, his voice breaking slightly, "and I've been paying for it ever since." He explained how, just 3 months after their divorce, he had officially begun dating Vanessa and quickly married her. 6 months into that marriage, Vanessa left him, taking half of what remained of his assets. "She wasn't who I thought she was," he said with bitter irony. "After her, there were others, none of them genuine. Each relationship took more of what I had, not just money, but pieces of myself." Patricia listened with polite attention, but felt strangely disconnected from his story, as if he were talking about someone else's life rather than their shared past. "Every day I regret not being honest with you," he continued, his eyes now meeting hers with intensity. "I remember how you asked me to be sincere, even if it hurt. I should have told you I was starting to cross a line I shouldn't have, and that I needed your help. That regret is like a stake through my chest that I can't remove." As Nathan spoke about his failures and regrets, Patricia found herself reflecting on her own journey since leaving him. The initial months had been challenging, finding affordable housing, balancing her studies with her internship, learning to be completely self-reliant. But those challenges had forged her into someone stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. "I should have valued what we had," Nathan was saying, his eyes pleading for understanding, or perhaps forgiveness. "The way you supported me, believed in me, I've never found that again." Patricia took a sip of her coffee, allowing the bitter taste to fill her mouth before responding. "Nathan, I appreciate your apology," she said finally, her tone measured. "But I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. Neither are you." The confidence in her voice wasn't something she had to manufacture. It came naturally now. The frightened woman who had slipped out of their house before dawn with just a suitcase had transformed into someone who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. Nathan nodded slowly, a mixture of resignation and sorrow in his eyes. "I know. I just needed you to hear it, that I recognize what I lost, that I know it was entirely my fault." Patricia felt a flicker of sympathy for him, but it was overshadowed by the certainty that she had made the right decision in walking away. "What happened to your business?" she asked, changing the subject. She had heard rumors, but wanted to hear directly from him. He laughed without humor, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit she remembered well. Gone. Made some bad investments after Vanessa left. Then the economy took a downturn, and I wasn't in the right headspace to make smart decisions. He shrugged, a gesture that seemed to encompass both resignation and embarrassment. I'm working for someone else now. It's a step down, but it pays the bills. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. And what are you doing now? He asked, seeming genuinely curious about her life. I run my own educational consultancy, she replied, unable to keep a note of pride from her voice. I work with families who want to homeschool their children but need guidance on how to do it effectively. Nathan's eyebrows raised in surprise. That's impressive. You always were passionate about education, but I never imagined you'd start your own business. Neither did I, Patricia admitted, but the traditional system was too restrictive. I saw an opportunity to help children learn in ways that traditional schools weren't offering. As they continued talking, Patricia found herself thinking about how differently their lives had unfolded. While Nathan had lost almost everything, she had built something meaningful from nothing. Her company now employed 15 people and had helped hundreds of families provide quality education to their children outside the conventional system. You look good, Patricia, Nathan said suddenly, interrupting her thoughts. Happy. I'm glad for that, at least. She offered a small smile in return. I am happy, she confirmed, and meant it. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was authentically hers, built on her own terms. Their conversation was interrupted by the buzz of Patricia's phone. She glanced down to see a message from Marcus. Hope the meeting's going well. Dinner's taken care of when you get home. A warm feeling spread through her chest as she read his words. Marcus Jensen had entered her life just over a year ago, when he had sought her professional advice as a single father wanting to homeschool his daughter. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship, and then, almost unexpectedly, into love. I should go, she said, gathering her purse and jacket. It was interesting to see you again, Nathan. He looked as if he wanted to say more, but simply nodded. Thank you for listening, he said quietly. I didn't deserve even that much. As Patricia stood to leave, Nathan asked one final question. Do you ever regret it? Walking away without taking anything? Patricia paused, considering the question seriously. No, she answered honestly. What I gained by leaving was worth far more than anything I left behind. She walked out of the cafe into the bright afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter somehow. The conversation with Nathan hadn't reopened old wounds as she'd feared it might. Instead, it had reaffirmed how far she had come. Driving home, Patricia reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this point. If Nathan hadn't betrayed her, she might never have discovered her own strength. She might never have built her business, which now gave purpose to her days. And she might never have met Marcus, whose patient understanding and genuine kindness had restored her faith in love. When she arrived home, the modest but comfortable house she now shared with Marcus welcomed her with its familiar warmth. The sound of music drifted from the kitchen, along with the enticing aroma of dinner being prepared. Marcus looked up from the stove as she entered, his face lighting up with a smile that still made her heart skip. At 40, he had the distinguished look of someone comfortable in his own skin. Laugh lines around his kind eyes, salt and pepper hair that he kept neatly trimmed, and strong, capable hands that were equally adept at fixing things around the house and offering comfort when needed. How did it go? He asked, setting down the wooden spoon he'd been using to stir something that smelled delicious. Better than expected, Patricia replied, moving into the circle of his arms. It was actually good to see him in a way. It reminded me of how much has changed, how much I've changed. Marcus kissed the top of her head, a gesture of affection that had become precious to her. Want to talk about it over dinner? Later, she said, pulling back to look at him. First, I have something important to tell you. His expression turned serious, concern flickering in his eyes. Everything okay? Patricia smiled, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement bubbling up inside her. I took a test this morning, she said, her voice softening. I'm pregnant. The news had been unexpected. At 39, Patricia had almost given up on the dream of motherhood that she had once shared with Nathan. When she and Marcus had discussed children early in their relationship, they had agreed that if it happened, wonderful. But if not, his 10-year-old daughter Emma from his previous marriage would be enough for them. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression moving from shock to wonder to pure joy. "We're having a baby?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Patricia nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "We're having a baby." His answering whoop of delight made her laugh as he lifted her off her feet and spun her around the kitchen. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I love you," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "Both of you." Later that night, as they lay in bed discussing names and nursery colors, Patricia couldn't help marveling at life's unpredictable journey. The pain of her past had led her here, to this man, this home, this moment. Her old dream of motherhood, which had been buried under the rubble of her failed marriage, had resurfaced at exactly the right time, when she was with someone who truly valued her. The next morning, Patricia woke early, her mind already buzzing with plans for the day. As Director Elizabeth had predicted when Patricia had first shared her business idea, the demand for quality homeschooling resources had grown exponentially. Today she had a meeting with potential investors interested in taking her curriculum nationwide. As she showered and dressed, she thought about the many paths that had brought her to this point, the inheritance from Grandma Beatrice that had given her the financial freedom to take a risk, the mentorship of Director Elizabeth, who had recognized Patricia's potential and encouraged her to think beyond conventional educational models, the painful end of her marriage, which had forced her to discover her own resilience. Patricia placed a hand over her still flat stomach, thinking of the new life growing inside her. This child would never know the version of her that had been willing to shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations. They would know only the strong, independent woman she had become, someone who had faced betrayal and heartbreak but had refused to let it define her. As she headed downstairs for breakfast, she heard Marcus in the kitchen with Emma, their laughter filling the house with warmth. The sound reminded her of something her grandmother had told her long ago. "Sometimes, Patricia, losing what you thought you wanted is the only way to find what you truly need." How right Grandma Beatrice had been. 5 years ago, Patricia had walked away from what she thought was her perfect life, only to discover that true perfection wasn't found in the absence of challenges, but in the courage to face them head-on. The road hadn't been easy, but standing now at this crossroads, successful in her career, secure in her relationship, and expecting a child, she knew without a doubt that every difficult step had been leading her home. The quarterly investor meeting was in full swing as Patricia presented the latest expansion plans for her homeschooling consultancy. The conference room at the downtown hotel buzzed with energy as she confidently walked the potential investors through projected growth charts and success stories from families who had benefited from her innovative curriculum. "What sets our approach apart," Patricia explained, gesturing to the slide showing children engaged in hands-on learning activities, "is that we don't simply replicate traditional classroom experiences at home. We create customized learning pathways that honor each child's natural curiosity and learning style." She paused, taking in the engaged expressions of the investors seated around the polished conference table. At 39, Patricia had developed a commanding presence that drew people in, not with intimidation, but with authentic passion for her work. Her fitted navy blue maternity dress was professional, while subtly acknowledging her changing body, now showing the gentle curve of early pregnancy at 14 weeks. "Questions so far?" she asked, taking a sip of water. A woman in a crisp charcoal suit raised her hand. "These results are impressive, Mrs. Jensen. But how scalable is your approach? Personalization works well for boutique services, but can it translate to a broader market?" Patricia smiled, having anticipated this question. "Excellent point, Ms. Thornton. We've developed a tiered service model that makes our approach accessible at various price points." She clicked to the next slide. "Our digital platform provides the foundation, a comprehensive curriculum framework and resources that any family can access affordably. The personalization comes from our assessment tools that help parents identify their child's learning preferences and challenges." As the meeting continued, Patricia fielded questions with the ease that came from years of believing wholeheartedly in what she had built. 5 years ago, when she first launched her business with Grandma Beatrice's inheritance, many had doubted her vision. Traditional educators questioned whether homeschooling could provide adequate socialization and academic rigor. Parents worried about their ability to effectively teach their own children. Even Director Elizabeth, who had been supportive overall, had expressed concern about Patricia taking such a financial risk. The memory of those early days, working 18-hour days from her small apartment, creating curriculum materials late into the night, cold calling potential clients, made today's success all the sweeter. What had begun as a one-woman operation, born from personal necessity, had grown into a company that employed 23 people and served families across 3 states. "One final question," said an investor, who had been quiet throughout the presentation. "Where do you see this company in 5 years?" Patricia took a moment before answering, wanting her response to be both ambitious and authentic. "In 5 years, I see us as the leading resource for alternative education nationwide, with a presence in every state. But more importantly, I see us changing the conversation around what education can and should be, making quality, personalized learning accessible to every child, regardless of their circumstances or learning differences." After the meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions, Patricia gathered her materials, feeling the pleasant fatigue that came from giving her all to a presentation. As the investors filed out, she noticed one remaining, Robert Caldwell, whose investment firm had backed several successful education startups. "That was quite impressive, Mrs. Jensen," he said, approaching her. "Particularly your handling of the scalability question. Most entrepreneurs in your position overstate their ability to grow while maintaining quality." "I'd rather promise what I know we can deliver," Patricia replied, slipping her tablet into her leather portfolio. "Growth without substance isn't sustainable." Robert nodded approvingly. "Precisely why we're interested. Your company has solid foundations. But I wonder, have you considered acquisition offers? Several larger educational publishers are likely watching your progress with interest." The question caught Patricia off guard. "Selling hasn't been part of my 5-year plan," she admitted. "This company is personal to me." "Understandably so," Robert replied. "But the right partnership could accelerate your vision, provide resources beyond what organic growth allows. Just something to consider." He handed her his card. "I'd like to continue this conversation soon. My team has some ideas that might interest you." Patricia accepted the card, her mind already processing this unexpected perspective. As she left the hotel and headed to her car, she felt a flutter of movement in her abdomen, the baby's first discernible kicks. Placing a hand over the spot, she smiled, momentarily setting aside thoughts of business expansion and acquisition offers. The drive home took her past her old neighborhood, the one she had shared with Nathan. She rarely came this way anymore, the upscale area holding too many memories. But today, the familiar streets didn't trigger the dull ache they once had. Instead, she felt a strange sense of distance, as if she were viewing scenes from someone else's life. As she stopped at a red light, Patricia noticed a moving truck parked in front of what had once been her home. A sold sign stood on the freshly mowed lawn. She wondered briefly if Nathan had finally sold the house or if it had changed hands again since Vanessa's departure. The light turned green, and Patricia drove on, realizing with a start that she felt nothing but mild curiosity. The house that had once represented everything she had lost was now just another building in a neighborhood she no longer frequented. When Patricia arrived home, she found Marcus in the backyard with Emma, helping her with a science project. The 10-year-old had spread her materials across the patio table, a volcano model, bottles of vinegar and baking soda, and food coloring. "Patricia!" Emma called excitedly, waving her over. "We're about to make it erupt. Come watch." The easy way Emma had accepted Patricia into their lives never failed to touch her heart. From their first meeting, when Patricia had been simply Dad's homeschooling consultant, the girl had shown an openness that made blending their lives together feel natural and right. "I wouldn't miss it," Patricia replied, setting down her work bag and joining them at the table. "This looks very professional, Emma." Marcus caught her eye over Emma's head, mouthing, "How did it go?" Patricia gave him a subtle thumbs up before turning her attention to the impending volcanic demonstration. "Okay, stand back," Emma announced with theatrical flair, carefully pouring the vinegar into the baking soda-filled crater. The mixture bubbled and foamed immediately, red-colored lava flowing down the sides of the papier-mâché mountain. "That's awesome," Marcus exclaimed, high-fiving his daughter. "Make sure you get a picture for your project documentation." As Emma grabbed her tablet to take photos, Marcus moved to Patricia's side. "Successful meeting?" he asked quietly, his hand finding the small of her back. "Very," she confirmed. "I think we'll have the funding for the national expansion." But something unexpected came up. One of the investors hinted at acquisition possibilities. Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Selling the company? Is that something you'd consider?" "I don't know," Patricia admitted. "It wasn't on my radar until today. The right partner could help us reach more families faster, but it's your baby," Marcus finished for her, understanding in his eyes. "Your vision," Patricia nodded, unconsciously touching her stomach again. "Speaking of babies, this one started making his or her presence known today. First definite kicks during the meeting." Marcus's face lit up. "Really? Can I feel?" "Not yet. It's still pretty subtle. But soon." She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "How was your day?" Before Marcus could answer, Emma bounded back to them, tablet in hand. "Look at these pictures. They're perfect for my report. Dad, can we order pizza tonight? Please?" Marcus laughed, ruffling her hair. "I suppose we could celebrate your successful experiment with pizza. What do you think, Patricia?" "Pizza sounds perfect," she agreed, feeling the day's tension begin to melt away in the presence of her family. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Patricia and Marcus sat on the porch swing, enjoying the mild spring evening. Patricia had changed into comfortable leggings and one of Marcus's old t-shirts, her hair loose around her shoulders. "So tell me more about this acquisition talk," Marcus said, his arm around her shoulders. "Is it something you're seriously considering?" Patricia sighed, watching the neighborhood settle into nighttime quiet. "I don't know. Part of me thinks it would be selling out, compromising the vision that makes us different. But another part sees the practical benefits. We could reach so many more families with the right resources behind us." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What does your gut tell you?" "That's the problem. My gut is confused," Patricia admitted with a small laugh. 5 years ago, the decision would have been easy. I would have rejected any offer outright. The company was my lifeline then, the only thing that was truly mine after the divorce. "And now?" Marcus prompted gently. Patricia turned to look at him, gratitude washing over her for this man who always knew how to help her clarify her thoughts without pushing his own agenda. "Now, my identity isn't solely tied to the business. I have us, this family we're building. I have more perspective. Whatever you decide, I'm with you," Marcus assured her, kissing her temple. "You built something remarkable from scratch. You have every right to protect it, or to let it evolve in ways you hadn't initially planned." As they rocked gently on the swing, Patricia reflected on how different this relationship was from her marriage to Nathan. With Nathan, major decisions had often felt like battles to be won, rather than problems to solve together. Marcus approached their partnership with a genuine respect for her autonomy that made her feel both supported and free. "I have that follow-up meeting with Robert Caldwell next week," she said finally. "I'll hear him out, see what kind of partnership they're envisioning. No harm in listening." "Sounds reasonable," Marcus agreed. "And speaking of next week, don't forget we have the 20-week ultrasound on Thursday. Maybe we'll find out if baby Jensen is a boy or girl." Patricia smiled, excitement bubbling up at the reminder. "I still can't believe this is happening sometimes. After everything, a baby at 39. Marcus's hand moved to rest over her growing bump. "Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." The simple truth of his statement resonated deeply with Patricia. Nothing about her current life had been part of her plan 5 years ago when she walked out of her marriage with just a suitcase and wounded pride. The painful ending of one chapter had somehow led to this beautiful beginning. The next morning, Patricia was reviewing curriculum materials in her home office when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Director Elizabeth Harrington, her former mentor and now occasional collaborator. "Elizabeth, what a nice surprise," Patricia answered warmly. "Patricia, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," came the familiar authoritative voice that had guided Patricia through her early teaching career. "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling with an opportunity I thought might interest you," Elizabeth explained. "The State Education Board is forming a special committee to explore alternative learning models, including homeschooling. They're looking for innovators with proven methods to serve as advisors." I immediately thought of you. Patricia sat up straighter. Her interest piqued. "That sounds intriguing. What exactly would the role involve?" "Quarterly meetings, reviewing proposed policy changes, advising on best practices," Elizabeth detailed. "It's a 3-year appointment, purely advisory, but potentially influential in shaping how alternative education is regulated and supported moving forward." The opportunity aligned perfectly with Patricia's broader mission of legitimizing and expanding access to quality homeschooling. "I'd be honored," she replied without hesitation. "Thank you for recommending me." "You've earned it," Elizabeth said with characteristic directness. "What you've built is impressive, Patricia. I admit I had my doubts when you left traditional education, but you've proven me wrong in the best possible way." Coming from Elizabeth, whose high standards were legendary, the compliment meant everything. "That means a lot, Elizabeth. Truly." After scheduling lunch to discuss the committee position further, Patricia ended the call feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The State Education Board position, combined with the potential investment partnership, could elevate her work from regional success to national influence. As she returned to reviewing curriculum materials, Patricia's thoughts drifted to the conversation with Nathan at the cafe. His regret had seemed genuine, his life a cautionary tale of what happens when you take for granted the things that truly matter. For a brief moment, Patricia wondered what her life would have been like had she stayed, if she had fought for their marriage despite his betrayal, if she had accepted his dismissive, "this is normal" explanation for their fading connection. Would she have eventually found professional fulfillment? Would they have had children? Or would she have slowly diminished herself, compromising her dreams to preserve a marriage that existed more in appearance than in substance? The thought experiment left her feeling cold. Walking away had been the hardest and best decision of her life, not because it had led to financial success or even to meeting Marcus, but because it had forced her to discover her own worth separate from anyone else's validation. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if reinforcing the rightness of the path that had led her here. Patricia smiled, placing her hand over the movement. "I hear you, little one," she murmured. "The past is just that, past. We're focused on the future now." With renewed energy, Patricia turned back to her work, ideas for expanding her curriculum already taking shape in her mind. The journey hadn't been easy, but standing now at this intersection of personal and professional fulfillment, she wouldn't change a single step of the path that had brought her home. The morning of the 20-week ultrasound dawned clear and bright. Patricia woke early, a mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her chest. Today, they might learn whether they were having a son or daughter. The milestone made the pregnancy feel more real somehow. This baby was no longer just an abstract concept, but a person with an identity beginning to take shape. Marcus was already up, preparing breakfast in the kitchen. The smell of coffee and toast filled the house as Patricia made her way downstairs, one hand resting on her growing bump. "Morning," Marcus greeted her with a smile, sliding a cup of herbal tea across the counter. "Sleep okay?" Patricia nodded, accepting the tea gratefully. "Better than expected. I think I've finally found a comfortable sleeping position." "Good timing," Marcus said, glancing at the clock. "Big day today?" Emma bounded into the kitchen then, already dressed for school in her uniform, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Is today when you find out if I'm getting a brother or sister?" she asked, reaching for a piece of toast. "If the baby cooperates," Patricia answered, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. Emma had been thrilled about the pregnancy from the moment they'd told her, immediately offering name suggestions and planning how she would help with the baby. "I still hope it's a sister," Emma declared confidently. "Boys are annoying, like Jason in my class who always pulls girls' hair." Marcus laughed. ruffling his daughter's hair. "I'm a boy too, you know." Emma rolled her eyes with the practiced exasperation of a preteen. "You're not a boy, Dad. You're a grown-up." After breakfast and dropping Emma at school, Patricia and Marcus headed to the obstetrics clinic. In the waiting room, Patricia flipped through a parenting magazine without really seeing the pages, her mind elsewhere. "Nervous?" Marcus asked softly, noticing her distraction. Patricia looked up, offering a small smile. "A little. It's silly, I know." "Not silly at all," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "This is a big moment." "Patricia Jensen?" a nurse called, and they both stood to follow her to the ultrasound room. The technician, a woman with a kind smile and efficient manner, had Patricia lie back on the examination table. "Ready to get a good look at your baby?" she asked, applying the gel to Patricia's abdomen. Patricia nodded, reaching for Marcus's hand as the technician pressed the ultrasound wand against her skin. The room filled with the rapid whooshing sound of the baby's heartbeat. "Strong heartbeat," the technician commented approvingly. 150 beats per minute, which is perfect." The screen flickered with gray and white shadows that slowly resolved into a recognizable shape. A head, a spine, tiny hands and feet. Patricia felt tears spring to her eyes at the sight of their child, perfectly formed and so much bigger than at the 12-week scan. "Everything looks excellent," the technician said, moving the wand to capture different angles. "Good brain development. Spine looks perfect. Heart chambers all clearly defined." She continued pointing out various anatomical features, confirming that the baby's development was right on track. "Would you like to know the sex?" she asked finally, looking at both parents. Patricia and Marcus exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication passing between them. "Yes," they answered in unison. The technician moved the wand slightly, searching for the right angle. "Well, it looks like, congratulations, you're having a little girl." A daughter. The word echoed in Patricia's mind as joy bloomed in her chest. A little girl who would grow up knowing she was wanted and loved, who would have both Patricia and Marcus to guide her, and Emma as a big sister to look up to. "A girl," Marcus repeated, his voice thick with emotion. When Patricia looked up at him, she saw tears in his eyes matching her own. After the appointment, they sat in the car for a moment, the black and white ultrasound photos spread out on the dashboard. "She's perfect," Patricia whispered, tracing the outline of their daughter's profile with her fingertip. "Just like her mother," Marcus replied, leaning over to kiss her gently. As they drove home, Patricia felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. 5 years ago, when she had walked away from her marriage to Nathan, the dream of motherhood had seemed lost forever. Now, at 39, she was not only expecting a child, but doing so with a partner who truly saw and valued her. The following week brought Patricia's meeting with Robert Caldwell to discuss the potential acquisition of her company. She had spent days preparing, analyzing the pros and cons, and discussing different scenarios with Marcus. By the time she walked into the downtown office building where Robert's investment firm was headquartered, she felt centered and clear about her priorities. Robert greeted her warmly, leading her to a sleek conference room where 2 other people waited, a woman in her 50s whom he introduced as Caroline Winters, CEO of National Learning Resources, and a younger man named Daniel Perkins, their Chief Innovation Officer. "Thank you for meeting with us," Caroline began, once they were all seated. "We've been following your company's growth with great interest." Patricia nodded, maintaining a professional smile. "I appreciate your interest. Robert mentioned you might have a partnership proposition." "More than a partnership," Caroline clarified. "National Learning Resources is interested in acquiring your company and methodology. We believe your approach to homeschooling curriculum represents the future of personalized education." Over the next hour, they outlined their vision, incorporating Patricia's curriculum into their broader educational offerings, expanding it nationally through their established distribution channels, and potentially developing a technology platform to make the resources even more accessible. The financial offer they presented was substantial, far more than Patricia had imagined her relatively small company might command. But what caught her attention most was their apparent respect for her vision and methodology. "We don't want to change what makes your approach special," Caroline emphasized. "We want to scale it, to make it available to families who might never otherwise have access to such quality resources. "And what would my role be in this arrangement?" Patricia asked, the question that had been foremost in her mind. "We'd want you to head the new homeschooling division," Daniel explained. "Complete creative control over curriculum development, with our resources behind you. A 5-year contract to start, with options to renew." It was, on paper, an ideal scenario, the reach and resources Patricia had dreamed of, without sacrificing the integrity of her educational philosophy. Yet something held her back from immediate enthusiasm. "This is certainly an intriguing proposition," she said carefully. "I'll need some time to consider all aspects of the offer." "Of course," Robert agreed. "Take 2 weeks. Review the materials with your attorney. We're prepared to be flexible on some of the terms." As Patricia left the meeting, her mind was already analyzing the opportunity from all angles. The acquisition would provide financial security for her family and broader impact for her educational methods. But it would also mean surrendering some measure of control, working within a corporate structure rather than leading her own independent company. That evening, as she and Marcus prepared dinner together, she shared the details of the offer. "It's extremely generous," Marcus observed, slicing vegetables for a salad. "What's holding you back?" "I can tell something is." Patricia sighed, stirring the pasta sauce thoughtfully. "I'm not entirely sure. On paper, it's everything I could want. Resources, reach, respect for my methods. But something feels off." "Trust that feeling," Marcus advised. "You built this company from nothing. You know its heart better than anyone." "Part of me wonders if I'm just being stubborn," Patricia admitted. "Resistant to change because this company has been so personal to me. It was my lifeline after the divorce." Marcus set down his knife, turning to face her fully. "It's not stubborn to protect something you've built with your whole heart. But it's also not wrong to let it evolve, if that evolution aligns with your values." Patricia nodded, grateful as always for his balanced perspective. "I have 2 weeks to decide. I want to talk to some of our client families, get their take on what a corporate partnership might mean for the services they've come to rely on." The next day, Patricia arranged meetings with several long-term client families. The first was with the Morellis, whose twin boys had flourished using her curriculum after struggling in traditional school. "We'd follow your program anywhere," Diane Morelli told her without hesitation. "You've transformed how our boys learn. But I do worry that a big company might eventually water down what makes your approach special: the personalization, the responsiveness to each child's needs." Similar conversations with other families revealed a common thread: deep appreciation for her methods coupled with wariness about corporate influence. One father, whose daughter had learning differences that had gone unaddressed in public school, was particularly adamant. "Your curriculum was the first time someone saw my Lily as capable, not broken," he said, emotion evident in his voice. "If you can guarantee that spirit won't be lost, then by all means, reach more kids. But if there's any risk of it becoming another one-size-fits-all approach with your name slapped on it, that would be a tragedy." These conversations weighed heavily on Patricia's mind as she drove to her lunch meeting with Director Elizabeth. The older woman had been both mentor and friend throughout Patricia's career transitions, and her perspective on the acquisition offer would be invaluable. Elizabeth was already seated at their usual table when Patricia arrived at the restaurant, a small Italian place halfway between their respective offices. "You look thoughtful," Elizabeth observed after they had ordered. "The committee appointment weighing on you?" Patricia shook her head. "Actually, I've received an acquisition offer for my company from National Learning Resources." Elizabeth's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's significant. NLR doesn't make small moves. What are you thinking?" "That's the problem," Patricia admitted. "I'm torn. The resources they're offering could help me reach so many more families, but I worry about maintaining the integrity of my approach within a corporate structure." Elizabeth considered this, taking a sip of her water before responding. "When I first became a school director, I was offered a position with a prestigious private school network. More money, more prestige, but less autonomy. I turned it down because I realized something important. Influence without alignment is just compromise. Influence without alignment is just compromise." Patricia repeated slowly. That resonates with me. Ask yourself this, Elizabeth continued. Will this acquisition amplify your voice or dilute it? Will it extend your vision or reshape it into something more commercially viable but less true? The conversation with Elizabeth clarified something Patricia had been feeling but couldn't articulate. The question wasn't just about reach or resources, it was about authenticity and purpose. That evening, she sat in the nursery she and Marcus had begun preparing for their daughter, running her hand over the soft yellow paint they had chosen for the walls. The room was coming together beautifully, a comfortable rocking chair in one corner, bookshelves waiting to be filled with stories, and a handcrafted wooden crib that Marcus had spent weeks building. As she looked around the peaceful space, Patricia thought about the values she wanted to model for her daughter: integrity, courage, the willingness to stand by one's principles, even when an easier path presented itself. The baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's contemplation. Patricia smiled, placing her hand over the movement. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Should Mommy take the safe corporate path or keep building something true to her heart?" The decision crystallized then, bringing with it a sense of clarity and peace. Whatever path she chose needed to align with the example she wanted to set for both Emma and this new little life. It needed to honor the journey that had brought her here, from the painful ending of her marriage to the beautiful new beginning she was now experiencing. In that quiet moment of connection with her unborn daughter, Patricia knew exactly what her answer to National Learning Resources would be. The path forward wasn't about safety or even maximum impact. It was about authenticity and living true to the values that had guided her rebuilding after leaving Nathan. 5 years ago, walking away from material comfort into uncertainty had been the bravest thing she'd ever done. Now, she found herself facing another defining choice, one that would shape not just her professional legacy, but the example she set for her daughters about courage, integrity, and staying true to one's vision. "I've made my decision," Patricia announced, sitting across from Robert, Caroline, and Daniel in the now familiar conference room. 2 weeks had passed since their initial offer, during which Patricia had consulted with her attorney, spoken with client families, and reflected deeply on what truly mattered to her. The 3 executives leaned forward slightly, anticipation evident in their postures. Caroline, in particular, seemed confident in the outcome, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. National Learning Resources has presented an extremely generous acquisition offer, Patricia began, keeping her voice steady and professional. "The financial terms are more than fair, and I appreciate your stated commitment to preserving the integrity of my curriculum." Robert nodded encouragingly. "We truly believe in what you've built, Patricia. This partnership could bring your methods to thousands more families across the country." Patricia took a deep breath before continuing. "However, after careful consideration, I must decline your offer." The surprise on their faces was immediate. Caroline's smile vanished, replaced by a slight furrow between her brows. Daniel exchanged a quick glance with Robert, who recovered first. "May I ask why?" Robert inquired, his tone carefully neutral. "If it's the financial terms, we have some flexibility." Patricia shook her head. "It's not about the money. My decision comes down to mission alignment. While I believe in your company's broader goals, my conversations with families who use our curriculum have reinforced something essential about what we've built: the deeply personalized approach and the direct connection between my team and the families we serve." She placed her hands on the table, leaning forward slightly to emphasize her point. In a corporate structure, no matter how well-intentioned, those elements would inevitably be compromised over time. What makes our approach effective is precisely what would be difficult to scale within a larger organization. Caroline's expression shifted from surprise to something more calculating. "That's a bold assumption, Patricia. We've successfully integrated other educational innovators without compromising their core methodologies." "I don't doubt your intentions," Patricia replied diplomatically, "but I've developed an alternative approach that I believe better serves both our interests." All 3 executives looked at her with renewed interest. "Instead of an acquisition, I'm proposing a strategic partnership," Patricia explained, sliding folders across the table to each of them. My company remains independent, maintaining full control over curriculum development and direct service to families. National Learning Resources gains exclusive distribution rights to a specialized version of our curriculum designed for schools and learning centers nationwide. Daniel opened his folder first, scanning the proposal with evident curiosity. Essentially, you keep your boutique operation serving individual families, while we bring a modified version of your methodology to institutional settings? Exactly, Patricia confirmed. Your company gets a proven, innovative curriculum to differentiate your institutional offerings, while my team continues to refine and perfect our approach with direct client feedback. Both entities benefit, and most importantly, more children receive personalized education tailored to their needs. Robert was reading through the financial terms, his expression thoughtful. These revenue-sharing percentages are quite favorable to us, because distribution is where your company excels, Patricia acknowledged. My strength is in innovation and direct implementation. This partnership leverages the best of both worlds without forcing either company to compromise its core identity. A moment of silence fell over the room as all three executives exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. This is unexpected, Caroline finally said, closing her folder, but intriguing. We'll need to review this proposal thoroughly with our team. Of course, Patricia responded, feeling a surge of confidence. She had entered this meeting prepared for outright rejection of her counterproposal, but their interests suggested she had found a middle path that might work for everyone. Take whatever time you need. I'm open to refining the terms to ensure mutual benefit. As she stood to leave, Robert rose as well, extending his hand. This is why we were interested in you to begin with, Patricia. You think differently. Whatever comes of this particular proposal, I suspect we'll find a way to work together. Patricia shook his hand, then Caroline's and Daniel's in turn. I hope so. I believe we share the same ultimate goal, transforming education for the better. The spring sunshine greeted her as she exited the building, and Patricia paused for a moment on the sidewalk, tilting her face up to feel its warmth. The weight of the decision had been lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet certainty that she had chosen the right path. Not the easiest one, perhaps, but the one that aligned with her values and vision. Later that afternoon, Patricia sat in her office at home, responding to emails from client families, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Nathan Blackwood, a name she rarely saw anymore. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Nathan," she answered, her tone polite but reserved. "Patricia?" His voice came through, sounding strained. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "I have a few minutes," she replied, glancing at the clock. "What can I do for you?" There was a brief pause before he continued. "I wanted to let you know, I'm moving. Out of state. The house finally sold. And I've accepted a position in Seattle." Oh, Patricia absorbed this information, mildly surprised that he felt the need to tell her. "I see. Well, I wish you the best with your fresh start." "Thank you," Nathan said, and then hesitated again before adding, "I also wanted to apologize again. For everything. Seeing you a few months ago, how well you're doing. It made me realize even more clearly what I threw away." Patricia closed her eyes briefly, feeling not pain but a gentle closure at his words. "We all make choices, Nathan. I've made peace with ours a long time ago. I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for in Seattle. You always were more gracious than I deserved," he said quietly. "Before I go, I wanted to ask, are you happy, Patricia? Truly happy?" The question caught her off guard with its directness and apparent sincerity. She thought about her thriving business, her loving relationship with Marcus, Emma's wholehearted acceptance of her, and the daughter they would welcome in just a few months. "Yes," she answered simply, her hand moving to rest on her rounded abdomen where the baby was particularly active today. "I am truly happy." "Good," Nathan replied, and she could hear a bittersweet smile in his voice. "That's all I needed to know. Goodbye, Patricia." "Goodbye, Nathan," she said softly, and ended the call. She sat for a moment, reflecting on how much had changed. The conversation had stirred no lingering pain or resentment, only a peaceful acknowledgement that their paths had diverged for good reasons. Whatever struggles Nathan still faced were his own journey now, separate from hers. The sound of the front door opening and Emma's cheerful voice calling out broke through her thoughts. Patricia rose, leaving her work behind to greet Marcus's daughter, and soon to be her stepdaughter officially. "How was school?" Patricia asked as Emma dropped her backpack by the door, a habit they were still working on breaking. "Amazing!" the girl exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement. "I got the highest score on the science project. Teacher said my volcano had the best documentation and research questions." "That's wonderful," Patricia replied, genuinely proud. "I knew all that extra research would pay off." Marcus appeared in the doorway behind Emma, carrying groceries. He winked at Patricia over his daughter's head. "Someone's been talking about her science victory the entire drive home." "As she should," Patricia affirmed, helping him with the bags. "This calls for a celebration. How about making those special cookies you love, Emma?" "Yes!" the girl pumped her fist triumphantly. "Can I call Grandma and tell her about my project too?" "Of course," Marcus agreed. "After you put your backpack where it belongs." As Emma raced off to properly store her school things, Marcus turned to Patricia. "How did the meeting go?" "I turned down the acquisition," she told him, beginning to unpack the groceries. "Proposed a distribution partnership instead. They seemed interested, though nothing's decided yet." Marcus studied her face. "And how do you feel about it?" Patricia smiled. The sense of rightness still settled comfortably in her chest, completely at peace. It was the right decision. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, pulling her into a gentle embrace, standing firm when it would have been easier to take the sure thing. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Patricia and Marcus sat on the back porch swing, a tradition they had established early in their relationship. The night was warm, the air fragrant with the jasmine that climbed the trellis near their patio. Patricia leaned against Marcus's solid presence, his arm around her shoulders. "I got a call from Nathan today," she mentioned, looking up at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "He's moving to Seattle, sold the house." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand making gentle circles on her shoulder. "How do you feel about that?" It was the same question he'd asked about her business decision, and Patricia appreciated that he never presumed to know her feelings. "It feels like the final chapter of that part of my life is closing," she answered thoughtfully. "Like the last thread has been neatly tied off." Marcus nodded, understanding in his silence. It was one of the things she loved most about him, his ability to simply listen without rushing to fill the space with words or solutions. "He asked if I was happy," Patricia continued after a moment. "It was such a strange question coming from him, but I realized I could answer it honestly. I am happy, Marcus. Deeply, genuinely happy." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad. You deserve every bit of that happiness." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the gentle motion of the swing almost lulling Patricia to sleep. The baby was active tonight, rolling and kicking as if joining their quiet moment. "I've been thinking about names," Patricia said finally, guiding Marcus's hand to feel a particularly strong kick. "What do you think about Beatrice, after my grandmother?" "Beatrice," Marcus repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Strong, classic. What about Beatrice Elizabeth? To honor your mentor too?" "Beatrice Elizabeth Jensen," Patricia said softly. "It's perfect." 3 months later, on a warm summer morning, Patricia held her newborn daughter in her arms, marveling at the tiny perfection of her features. The labor had been long but uncomplicated, and now, in the quiet of the hospital room with sunlight streaming through the windows, she felt a completeness she had never known before. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed beside them, his eyes never leaving the small bundle in Patricia's arms. Emma stood next to him, peering with fascination at her new baby sister. "She's so tiny," Emma whispered, carefully touching Beatrice's miniature fingers, "and her hands keep making fists." "That's her grasping reflex," Patricia explained, smiling at the girl's curiosity. "It's instinctive." A knock at the door preceded the entrance of a nurse, followed by Director Elizabeth, carrying a bouquet of lilies. "Is this a good time for a quick visit?" the older woman asked. "Of course," Patricia welcomed her, adjusting the blanket around Beatrice. "Elizabeth, meet Beatrice Elizabeth Jensen." Elizabeth's expression softened as she approached the bed, setting the flowers on a nearby table. "She's beautiful, Patricia, and I'm honored by her middle name." "It seemed fitting," Patricia replied. "You've been such an important part of my journey." As Elizabeth admired the baby, Patricia found herself reflecting on the path that had led to this moment. 5 years ago, standing in her kitchen reading that fateful message on Nathan's phone, she could never have imagined the life waiting for her on the other side of heartbreak. The courage to walk away from what no longer served her had opened the door to everything she now cherished. A career that fulfilled her purpose, a partner who truly saw and valued her, a stepdaughter who had embraced her with open arms, and now this perfect little girl who represented not the ending of her story, but its most beautiful continuation. 2 weeks after Beatrice's birth, Patricia received a call from Robert Caldwell. National Learning Resources had accepted her partnership proposal with minor modifications. The contract was being drawn up, with work to begin in 3 months, perfect timing for her maternity leave. That evening, as she nursed Beatrice in the nursery they had so lovingly prepared, Patricia gazed down at her daughter's peaceful face and whispered, "Your mommy took the road less traveled, little one. It wasn't always easy, but it led me to you, and that has made all the difference." Marcus appeared in the doorway, Emma at his side, both watching the scene with identical expressions of love. "Room for 2 more?" he asked softly. Patricia nodded, her heart so full it seemed impossible it could contain such joy. Always. As her family gathered around her, Patricia thought of that long-ago night when she had packed a single suitcase and walked away from what she had thought was her perfect life. She had been terrified then, uncertain of the future, with only her pride and determination to sustain her. What she hadn't understood then, but knew with bone-deep certainty now, was that endings were often disguised beginnings. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was to trust yourself enough to start over. Her journey had come full circle, but this circle was wider, richer, and infinitely more authentic than the one she had left behind. As Beatrice's tiny hand wrapped around her finger with surprising strength, Patricia felt the truth settle in her soul. She hadn't just survived the breaking of her old life. She had used those broken pieces to build something far more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. The message that had ended her marriage, "Too bad you weren't here 2 years earlier before I got married," once so devastating, now seemed like the first note in a symphony that had led her precisely where she was meant to be. With Marcus's arm around her shoulders, Emma leaning against her side, and Beatrice nestled safely against her heart, Patricia knew with unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, not in spite of the hardships she had faced, but because of them. Not despite the betrayal that had once broken her heart, but through the strength she had discovered in mending it. The perfect ending wasn't an ending at all, but a beginning, one she had earned through courage, resilience, and the unwavering belief that she deserved more than a love that asked her to diminish herself. This was her true happily ever after. Not a fairy tale, but something far better. A life authentically hers, built with her own hands, filled with a love that celebrated rather than confined her. As she looked at the faces of her family gathered around her, Patricia knew she wouldn't change a single step of the journey that had led her home. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.